This is Rick Lewis with Phenon Hoop Report. On today's Coach's Corner, I have Jim Rhodes from Hickory Grove. Welcome, Coach.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Coach Lewis. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Coach, you grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. You played Division II basketball at Fort Hays State University. In 2003, you became the JV coach at Independence. How in the world did you end up in Charlotte, North Carolina from Lawrence, Kansas?
Well, it was really kind of a God thing. Short answer is I married a Charlotte girl. We met in the year 2000. We were both playing for Athletes in Action, touring basketball teams. And we met in 2000 and started dating long distance. I still had a couple years left out at Fort Hays State, and she was here in Charlotte. She was actually playing professional basketball. So in the year 2003, we got married. I moved out here. We got married. I didn't have a job yet. I was interviewing at a couple different schools out here in Charlotte, and was lucky enough to get a spot on the staff at Independence High School, and that's kind of it. So the short answer is I married a Charlotte girl. So
I'm sure growing up that you were a Jayhawk fan living in Lawrence, Kansas. Your wife probably grew up being either a Carolina or Duke fan.
Yeah, I think she was more of a Carolina fan. She actually played at Wake Forest. If I can brag on her for a second, she played at Wake Forest and Charleston Southern. She's in the Hall of Fame at Charleston Southern, and actually played in the WNBA for a short stint and overseas. And she was a kind of a Carolina fan, but I'm still a Jayhawk fan. I still bleed crimson and blue. So.
Well, let me ask you this, Coach. Do you and your wife ever play one-on-one in basketball?
I've been asked that question a lot. When we first met, I mean, obviously she was still playing, and she actually practiced with my team for a little bit, and we did shooting contests and things like that. And I always tell people I let her win. When we first met, I let her win to try to be in her good graces. But she was a phenomenal. We're both played combo guard and two guard, and we're both shooters. So we had some really good shooting competitions.
Now, do you have any children?
We do. Part of the reason for this screen here, I told you earlier, is there may be a 3-ring circus behind me at any moment. But yeah, I have 4 kids right now. Reed's in 6th grade, Ty's in 3rd grade, and then I've got two girls with us right now in kindergarten. Riley and Mary are with us right now. They're both in kindergarten. So.
Are they going to follow in Mom and Dad's footsteps and become hoopers?
I hope so. They haven't caught that bug yet. They haven't caught the 500 shots a day regimen that we've been on, but they both like basketball a lot. I think that's because, there's usually a basketball game on in the house.
Well, if they do start playing the game of basketball, they have some very good teachers on how to shoot the ball.
That's true. Neither my wife or I were super athletic. I wasn't ever going to go dunk on anybody, but if there's a shooting gene, I hope it got passed down.
Well, in 2005, you became the coach at Hickory Ridge, and you were there for several years. And then you went from Hickory Ridge, you took a job at Porter Ridge, if I'm not mistaken, and you were there for several years, and you returned back to Hickory Grove.
Right.
So you went from a private school at Hickory Grove to Porter Ridge, then back to the Hickory Grove. So what went through your mindset going from private to public, back to private?
That's an interesting question. In a lot of ways, kids are kids wherever you're at. But I was at Independence and then Hickory Grove private school, so I've kind of been flip-flopping back and forth. And thinking about that, I guess, I've kind of chased, a lot of coaches chase talent around and things like that. But really thinking about it, I was really more chasing good administration. I wanted to work for good people. I was at Hickory Grove for 7 years, and we had a changeover in administration. Our head of school left and retired. And then the Porter Ridge job came open, and Sam Baisden was the principal, and I had worked for him at Independence, and Bill Rogers was the athletic director that I had worked for at Independence. And Porter Ridge was 2 stop signs away from my house. And so through a lot of prayer and talking with people, I mean, that was the only job I would have interviewed for, and ended up going down there. But then after 4 years there, new administration came on back at Hickory Grove, and I had the chance to be the athletic director. And I felt God was calling me back there at that time. So, and a chance to work for Jimmy Quessenberry and Adam Hamilton back at Hickory Grove, who were both friends of mine and men that I respected. A chance to work for them was something that I couldn't pass up.
Well, you've coached at the private school and the public school level. What's been the biggest challenge at each one, and how are they different?
You know, they are different. You know, a lot of times there's talk about, well, which one's better, private or public? I would say public school teams are more consistent. Like even that team that's, you know, below 500, they're still a really good team a lot of times. But then in the private, I think you have, you know, the very top, you know, where there's a team that's got 5 or 6 Division I guys. There's just a bigger, wide spectrum where, you know, and then later in that week, you may go play a team that's, I mean, you know, let's be honest, they look like a church ball team, a rec league team. You just find a bigger spectrum in the public, or excuse me, in the private schools. So I think that's the biggest difference. But like I said before, kids are kids. So, you know, coaching is coaching, and, you know, motivating and correcting kids and building those relationships. You know, kids are kids everywhere you go.
Let's go back to 2003 when you were at Independence High School and you were coaching a JV team. You had a pretty good nucleus of players. You had Akeem Hicks, Donnell Mack, and Andre Cornelius. Did you have any idea at that point in time how good they were going to be?
You know, I was fresh out of college. You know, I knew these guys were good, and listen, I went and played every single one of them one-on-one, and but I didn't know how good they would end up being. You know, on that JV team, I had those guys. I think Donnell and Andre were so good. I think they played in one scrimmage and maybe a game, and they were up on varsity. And Hakeem Nicks, you know, he was a man-child on the JV level. You know, Hakeem went on to play wide receiver at Carolina and played 10 years in the NFL for the New York Giants. Andre went on to have a great career at George Mason. And Donnell, you know, was one of the best players in the state and the East Coast, and went to play at Memphis and had an unbelievable career and played for Coach Cal. And yeah, all those guys were in my practice and in my gym. And, you know, I was helping with the varsity too, so I had relationships with those guys as, you know, they continued throughout their career. So that was amazing. We had so much talent there when I first got to Independence. You know, we had JT Tomko and his brother Chad, you know, went on to play at UNC Wilmington. I mean, we just had tons of talent.
2 other players that I know personally when you were at Hickory Grove is Nick Troll and Lee Branscombe. Yep. And I remember back in the day when my sons, Colby and Tyler, were playing at Forsyth Country Day. Yep. I think you guys came up at Hickory Grove with Nick and Lee and played Colby and Tyler at Forsyth Country Day. Do you remember that game? I
do remember that game. You know, those guys especially Colby and Nick and Lee had a great relationship with each other. So, you know, Nick and Lee were giving me scouting reports, and, you know, Colby had been in our gym. I think Colby and Seth Curry and Nick were all good friends and, you know, had been in our gym. And so I do remember that game. I remember going up feeling like we should win that game, and we didn't. I think Colby hit a lot of shots that night. And there was a little 8th grade kid running around in a big jersey. Tyler was playing on the varsity level. But I do remember that. I remember you guys won. I think we were a little overmatched in the front court. We couldn't rebound. I I remember leaving disappointed, feeling like we should have won that game.
Yeah. Now, Coach, let's talk about last year's team. Last year, you went 18-10. You have no seniors on the squad. So you returned basically everybody. Your whole starting five, your top 10 players are returning. Leading the way, we're going to start off with AJ Smith, who had a banner year. AJ Smith was averaging probably, 27 points a game?
28 and
28
8 rebounds.
You had DJ Cudetino with 14 points a game, and also Charles Stinson with 12. So you have three guys that's averaging in double figures. Talk about your expectations for the upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited about what we can do next year. Obviously with no seniors, we have everybody coming back. We made it to the third round of the playoffs. Asheville Christian beat us on a game-winning shot this year to go to the Final Four. And we felt like we came up a little short of what we could have done, but with everybody back and everybody hungry, with those guys you mentioned, I think all those guys are college basketball players. Jordan Nelson's another senior coming back who's a really good shooter and a great program guy and, has range out to, NBA range 30 feet. Sonny Jackson and Josiah Wilson started games for us, and they're coming back, and we're really excited. And, we've been talking about for years to some of these guys, if you stick together, you can win a state championship. And so there's no doubt that our aim is a state championship as far as wins and losses.
Well, like I said, you went 18-10 last year. You played a very tough and challenging schedule along the way.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to be the main competition at the 3A level?
Asheville Christian will be good again. They're losing, their top scorer coming back, but they're bringing everybody else back. First Assembly's always good. They're graduating a lot of guys, but Trey Benham's back. So I'm sure they'll be good again. Village is always good. And Cape Fear has seemed to be, and we haven't played them. Cape Fear seems to always end up making a deep run into the tournament. So, I think those guys will be some people we may see in the tournament. Hopefully we'll see them in the championship game. But, those teams I think are the ones. Carmel's been dominant in the 3A, but, they're moving up to 4A next year. And I think we got to be one of the favorites too.
Right. Well, you played against Concord First Assembly. They had a remarkable run last year, won the state championship. So the one thing about Coach Frank Canadori, he always seems to reload each and every year. So I'm sure they're going to be another tough team as well.
Absolutely. I think I've been back at Hickory Grove for 4 years, and I think First Assembly's won our conference, and we play in a tremendous conference. They've won conference, I think, 3 years in a row, maybe even 4. They're just so good. And this last year they had so much depth and size. But maybe next year's the year we caught them this last year. We lost by 4 points, I think, up at their place. Maybe next year's the year we can catch them.
Well, you'll definitely be more experienced. You'll have a lot of these guys will be a year older.
Right.
Smith will be a senior. Talking about AJ Smith, he's averaging 28 points a game. More impressively, he has a 4.7 GPA. Chase Stinson, another player who averaged in double figure, has a 4.25. And then you mentioned Jordan Nelson earlier, and he has a 3.75. How have you been able to develop the culture as far as a winning basketball program, but also maintaining the academics?
Yeah, it's just something that we really focus on. We have something that we call the law of the lion, or we've called it the Rhodes rules in the past. And it's something we talk about every day. There's 7 different, kind of mottos that we follow, but one of them is being a champion 24/7. One of my big things is you can't be a punk for 22 hours out of the day and then walk into the gym and all of a sudden be a hard worker and be a champion. It doesn't work like that. So, the way you act in the classroom is, what you do in the classroom is what you're going to do on the court. If you're going to slack in the classroom, you're going to slack on the court. And so all of that stuff carries over. So, I mean, that's something we push a lot. And, we have study halls and we check their grades, but, I can't take all this credit. We have a really awesome community, parents, our teachers, just the way our school is set up probably takes a lot of that credit.
Right.
We have some great parents that really, like you said, AJ's got a 4.75. His parents are great. They almost care more about academics. They do. They care more about academics than basketball. And there's a lot of parents like that. Our school right now is set up where if you drop below a C, every kid in our entire school has a grade check every four weeks. If you drop below a C, you automatically start getting lunch tutors. And our teachers bend over backwards to help our kids. It's a community effort. It's not just, I'd love to take all that credit for that, but I can't. Our parents and our staff and teachers are unbelievable. So that's a product of Hickory Grove.
Accountability in the students.
Absolutely.
Talking about AJ Smith, recently I've been doing a books and basketball and putting out social media tweets. And, with AJ Smith, I recently put out a tweet about him as far as him averaging 28 points a game. But more importantly, he has a 4.75 GPA. One of the schools that reached out to me about him was Stanford. Talk about his recruitment, who's offered him, and basically who's showing him the most interest.
Yeah. Well, he's been offered by, let's see, UNC Charlotte, UNC Wilmington, Texas A&M, App State, Winthrop, William and Mary Elon have come on and offered him recently. And then, there's a lot of schools that have reached out and are tracking him. A lot of, high academic schools, like you said, Stanford has reached out, Harvard, Princeton have reached out recently. And then, let's see, Providence, Marquette, Clemson have all asked for tape. So, he's got a lot of people looking at him. Temple's been tracking him for a year. There's a lot of people that, know his name and are tracking him and watching. One of the things with this COVID-19 thing, I think he would have had a really big role and really have a breakout with Team Charlotte this spring. And so I hope that, the guys get to play in July or, soon with their AAU teams, because I think once people really see him, they're going to be really impressed with him and his recruitment. He's just going to have more options. So.
He's just a high character young man. And, I've watched him play with Team Charlotte and also with Hickory Grove. The thing that I've been most impressed with is his mannerisms on the court and his body language.
Mm-hmm.
He always, has that good body language, and you just see he leads by example. He doesn't say a lot, but he does lead by example. Changing subjects, Coach, we talked about you at the beginning that when you played, you were an outstanding three-point shooter. Now the college game has extended the three-point line to the international line. Do you think the high school should follow suit and match the three-point line that's now in college?
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Being a shooter myself coming up, I played a little bit in South America and in Europe with different teams that, those couple of inches, it doesn't change that much, I don't think. It's not that big of a difference that you notice it playing. I think that would be a fine rule. It'd be hard to ask every school to get their lines repainted, over one summer.
Right.
The NBA line is a lot farther away. That may be something that's totally different. I played in the Charlotte Pro-Am, and one of the first times I came off and came out to that three-point line, I came off a screen and I turned and I felt like I was at half court. So I don't think that'd be a bad idea at all. It would just be more of a, is it cost effective? Can we actually do that? And I think that's a lot of the same conversation with the shot clock. I think the shot clock's a great idea. it would change the game some. You know, we played in a couple of your events that didn't have shot clock, or that did have the shot clock. And it didn't change the game that much in the games we were in, but in a game where it's close down the stretch. You know, last year we played Christ School, and it was a little bit close down the stretch. You can't go to a stall game. You've got to keep playing. So it does change the game a little bit. But for me as an athletic director, you know, thinking about, all right, now I got to, let's say we do go to this shot clock. You know, I got to buy this, you know, couple $1,000 system, but even more, I got to find another competent person to run the shot clock or pay another official. So there are some logistic things with the shot clock, which I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something we should do, but it's, you know, it's a little bit harder, the nuts and bolts of it and actually making it work on a day in, day out, you know, couple games a week thing is, it's a little harder than maybe what most people realize. So.
And we've used the shot clock at several of our events at the beginning of the high school season. And
yeah,
I was really surprised that the shot clock violation really never came into effect at all. In most situations, everybody shot the ball way before the end of the shot clock. The only situation where I thought it was really instrumental and it was fun to see is, like you said, at the end of a game where it was very close, it prevented teams from going into a delay or a stall, which I do like that part of it, that it forces the hand for them to go ahead and continue to play.
Yeah, and as a coach, you know, you got to play. As we headed into that first one, I mean, my coaching staff and I, we sat down and talked about, all right, well, how does this change for us? What does this do? And, you know, just like in college, I mean, you've got to have an under 10 second setup and action that you'll have to run. So it will change things as the way that we coach too.
Well,
so it would be interesting.
The very first event that we had, this was several years ago, and we basically statted like the average possession, like how much time went off before someone took a shot. And I think the average was like 15 seconds. So we had a 35-second shot clock. So when you go back and watch teams play, people will be very surprised on how quickly teams do get the ball off in the sets that they run. Talking about, you know, you're in the NCISAA, which I think has a tremendous amount of quality teams that are, a lot of these teams end up being nationally ranked teams. Some of these teams over the years have gone on to be in the Geico.
Yeah.
Since you've been back at Hickory Grove, what's the one team that's been the toughest matchup for you?
You know, I think, like I said earlier, I think First Assembly is probably, you know, they've won our conference 3 or 4 times, and I think that's the one team that we have not beaten our conference since I've been back. I mean, they've just been so loaded, and Frankie obviously does a great job up there. You know, they have been the best in our conference. Now, Northside's been good. Our conference is really good. You know, Northside's good. Southlake is good. Metrolina, 4A team, always has a good team. And Gaston Christian has gotten a lot better, and now Westminster Catawba all of a sudden is really good again too. So, you know, our conference is really good, and we haven't played as many of those 4A teams. You know, Cannon used to be in our conference. They're always really good. But to answer your question, I think First Assembly has been that one team that is just, we cannot get over the hump with them. They've been so good.
Now, Coach, you've always played in several of our Phenon events, and again, you're going to be playing in the upcoming season in several events. We're going to have a new event right before Christmas. We're going to be calling it the Phenon Queen City Challenge, and we're taking some of the top private school teams in the area and going up against the top public school teams in the area. So on the public school side, we're going to have Hickory Ridge, which is probably going to be the favorite to win their conference. We have Harding, which is going to probably be the favorite to win their conference this year. In addition, we have Vance, who's going to be probably the favorite to win their conference this year. So what do you think the fans can expect when we have some of the teams like yourself at Hickory Grove, Carmel Christian, Covenant Day going up against the top public school teams in the area?
You know, it sounds like a battle of champions here. You know, I hope that our team is up to the challenge, but you know, we don't usually get to play those teams unless it's in a tournament like this or maybe a team camp in the summer. And so, but you know, all the kids know each other. And Charlotte the fans in Charlotte, they come out to these type of events. And in some ways, this could become almost like a, champion of Charlotte type of thing. If you continue to get those best teams in Charlotte from the public and private, I think it could become a championship of Charlotte type of thing, at least in people's minds. I think it's a really cool idea. It sounds like maybe you're holding it at Myers Park, which has great facilities, 2 gyms that you can use. I'm really excited about it, and I know my players are excited about it. I've talked to them about it. Like I said, they're excited because they know those guys from those schools, and so a chance for us to do that it's really special.
And don't you think the young players, at every school, they want to play the best teams, and they don't worry about wins and losses. They just want to play the very best competition. And so do you as a coach.
Absolutely. Playing public schools, playing the best teams that we can, it gets us ready for the postseason, but it challenges our kids, and there's so many lessons that they can learn in playing in events like this. But the kids they come up going to these tournaments with their parents when they're in middle school. So when they get old enough, they want to be in that. They envision themselves like, when I'm in high school, I'm going to play in this. So the kids love these events.
Well, we think it's going to be a great event, and something of like hopefully we'll start as far as a city type championship that we can do right before Christmas. We did move the event. Harding is going to be opening up a brand new gym, so we wanted to work with them since it's going to be a new facility. We're going to host the event over at Harding. It will be December 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. We're going to have some great matchups between the public and the private school teams. Now, Coach, since 2003, you spent a few years as assistant coach, and the last 15 years you've been a head coach. What's the biggest lesson you've learned as a coach?
I think the biggest thing, maybe coming out as a player and being young, I didn't realize this, but the biggest thing is the relationships that I've built. I mean, I have no idea what my coaching record is. That's not what it's about. And I think if you're doing it just for wins and losses, then maybe it's a little short-sighted. But the relationships that I have built over the years, that means more than anything else. And, being able to impact these kids for, that they can be good basketball players now, but great husbands and fathers and great citizens. And then, being at Hickory Grove, we can impact them for eternity, talking to them about the gospel and Jesus Christ. And so that's bigger than anything else. That's the biggest lesson. I didn't know that was the best part of coaching, is the relationships. I didn't know that was and I was going to get out as much as anybody else. I was going to get as much out of it as anybody else or my players. So that's maybe the biggest lesson I've learned.
Coach, North Carolina is known as the Hoop State. What's it like to coach in North Carolina?
It's awesome. We have so much good coverage here, with yourselves and other recruiting services, and with social media now, we have such good coverage. And really the best part is I can turn on ESPN most nights and I can flip on a college basketball game and I'll see somebody from the Hoop State in that game. I'll look at me, I remember that kid, he played at North Mech, and I remember, this kid, and he played here. I remember coaching against this kid, that's probably the coolest thing, is that connection and the pride that we have, most of the coaches and the players have, just being from the Hoop State. It's exciting to see the level of talent and where these kids go and follow them on their career. That's probably the coolest thing about being from the Hoop State, is having this connection to all these kids.
Well, if you go back and look at some of our rankings from previous years, you'll see the number of people in the top 100 that play at all levels. And even this year, like our top 100, I mean, you got guys that are, ranked in the 60s that are going Division I because we have that number of quality players. And I remember a few years ago, we had over 75 players that went Division I. That's not counting Division II and Division III. And I remember one year there was 130 players that went on to play either D1, D2, D3 at some level, whether it was an NAIA. So the number of players that come out of North Carolina is just astronomical. And it is. We're called the Hoop State for that particular reason. Let me ask you this, Coach. You've been here in the Hoop State for 17 years. You're born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas. You ever thought about going back home?
Yeah, my mom still lives out there in Lawrence. And, a couple of years ago, a job at a high school that was just a couple miles down the road from my mom opened up. And I thought about maybe applying, but now Charlotte feels like home. My wife, her family's all here. My kids are here. Charlotte feels like home now. North Carolina feels like home. So I'd be lying if I say I didn't think about it, but I don't think I would move back. This is home now.
This is home.
This is home.
In closing, Coach, who's had the biggest impact on you as a coach?
Who has had the biggest impact on me? I've had lots of really good coaches that I've played for or watched. But if, maybe this sounds cliche, but the biggest thing for me probably, my whole life is centered around Jesus Christ. So when you realize that you are a sinner saved by grace, not of your own merit, and that changes the whole lens of how you look at life, including coaching. I mean, it informs everything I do. So Jesus Christ has had the biggest impact on me as a coach, on me as a person, and so me as a coach. And so the way I treat my players, the way I treat my staff, the way I treat the referees, the way just I run my life is all because of Jesus Christ. So to answer that, now I've had tons of great coaches coming up. And like every other coach, I mean, we kind of pull stuff from everybody to put into our system. So, I think back when I was growing up, Roy Williams was at Kansas. Everybody within a 500-mile radius ran the Carolina break and ran the box series. And so I think Coach Williams, and I grew up in Lawrence with Coach Williams' kids. He's had a big impact on me too. So that may be my next answer. But I've had a ton of good coaches, probably more coaches than I can mention here. Those would be my two answers.
Well, Coach, the one thing I've noticed about you is, and especially with your answer about, what was the biggest lesson you've learned, and you talk about relationships. And the one thing I've noticed about you over the years is how you conduct yourself on the sideline. You're very professional. You conduct yourself as a Christian on the sideline. So those are some important things to me as just observing from a distance. And you're doing things for the right reason. And I think when, going back and listening to your story about, you played with Athletes in Action for a short period of time, how you met your wife, and now how you've lived in Charlotte, and that's your new home, and the impact that you've made. I'm sure the thing that coaching young men like Lee and Nick Troll and those guys, those are the relationships that you value for the rest of your life.
I was texting Nick Troll earlier this morning. He's got kids now, and we still keep in contact. I mean, it's amazing. And, that's the way God set us up too. We're relational beings. That's what really matters. Wins and losses and trophies are fleeting, but it's those relationships. God's called us to love him and then love others. And so it's those relationships that really speak to our heart and last forever. So that's the best part of coaching for sure.
Well, Coach, thank you for coming on today on Coach's Corner. You went 18-10 last year. I think you're going to be the heavy favorite to win the 3A this year. We want to wish you good luck.
Hope so.
You have a talented group, and you have the right mindset, and I'm sure you're going to temper the expectations in the right way. And we just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for us as far as participating in Phenom events, and we look forward to seeing you this coming season.
Absolutely, Coach. Thank you for all you've done for our players and our players over the years. And, a lot of reason that all those kids are going to college is because of you guys. So I appreciate you guys too.
Uh-huh.